The HMan, The Secret of the Telegian, and The Human Vapor are a trio of science fiction movies by Toho, and collectively known as the Transforming Humans series. All of them share the same premise of a human being that uses superpowers gained through scientific experiments to commit atrocious crimes due to personal reasons. They also share everything else. The two movies have essentially the same storyline with most of the same beats and structure. You could argue this is true for most films, especially Toho ones, but once you start using the same premise as well, the formula becomes much more apparent. In all three movies, the police are left gawked with crime scenes from which the criminals just vanish without a trace. Once they start poking around, it becomes clear the ones perpetrating the crimes are not mere humans, but instead supernatural beings with some personal reason behind their crimes. Then halfway through, the truth is unceremoniously revealed to all, and the rest of the plot is a slugfest, with the police trying to catch these mutant criminals whatever way they can. That's it, that's the three films. There is even the same scene of women in little clothing dancing on nightclubs owned by mobsters on two of these films. The details change, but the course remains the same. But since we are here anyway, I might as well digress a little more on these details that make each movie stand apart from each other, so here we go. Originally, I was going to cover just The HMan, as it was the only movie remaining from the box set I bought. However, after watching it for the first time, I realized there's literally nothing good to say about this film. Nothing. Nada. Zero. I swear for God. This is one of the worst, if not the worst Toho tokusatsu I've ever seen, and I've seen some crap. For a start, the plot is not incomprehensible, relying heavily on a mob and cop's tale to move forward. This story is not only very difficult to follow if you are not paying attention, mentioning names you don't care about and events we've never seen, it is also only marginally attached to the main plot. I don't know about you, but investing so much time with characters and action that ultimately don't matter is a massive waste of time. It is almost like they were trying to make a crime movie and just decided to shove a monster into it. Not that it makes the whole crime story angle any better, mind you, it wouldn't be good anyway. The monster part of it is also lacking, with the creatures being sailors that got accidentally exposed to the radioactive fallout from nuclear tests at the Pacific. As a consequence, they turn into semi-sentient pools of green goo that return to Tokyo and start consuming people. People who are all conveniently connected to a drug smuggling ring. Honestly, there is a marginal chance they actually did explain why they were going after the mobsters. It is just that I was having a hard time focusing on the film, so... The only thing slightly worth noting in this movie is the fact it was inspired by the real-life incident of the fishing boat Daigo Fukuriu Maru, which, as you might recall, also served as one of the inspirations for the original Godzilla 4 years before. Other than that, I see no reason to talk about the HMan. It is another poorly executed cautionary tale about the perils of nuclear energy, which were quickly becoming a dime in a dozen in Toho's repertoire.
死の灰に覆われて我々人類が全滅した時次にこの地球を支配するのは液体人間であるかもしれない
I lost the count of how many times I had to listen to a sentence like that bookending one of these films, and if I could go on the rest of my life without listening to it ever again, that still wouldn't be long enough. Next. The Secret of the Telegian was originally written in 1959 by Shinichi Sekizawa, to be filmed by Ichiro Honda in the same year. Honda, however, left the project to direct Battle in Outer Space, and in his place they brought newcomer Jun Fukuda to helm it. Fukuda, of course, would later direct many a Godzilla film, most of which of dubious quality, but back then in 1960 he had only one movie under his belt, and not even a sci-fi movie at that. Despite none of that inspiring much trust, Telegian is, by quite a significant margin, the best film of the trio. Frankly, it is good enough to merit an entire video just about it, but I'm already halfway through this thing, so we are covering this movie as quick as possible. Unlike the previous film in which the monsters had no reason at all to go after their victims, here the titular Telegian is out for revenge, trying to kill the army officers who left him to die in a cave during the last days of World War II. To this end, he employs a teleportation machine that allows him to move close to his victims and deliver the killing blow. Of course, we don't know any of that at the start of the story, and we spend most of the first half trying to figure out how and why these murders are being committed. Like I said at the beginning though, the pacing halts to a grind once the truth is revealed, with not one, but two inconsequential chase sequences between the killer and the police. That is 3 chase sequences overall if you count another one earlier in the film. It is a fun movie nonetheless, with some inspired visuals and a villain that, despite having good motivations for hunting down the scummy people he hunts, is still an evil bastard himself. And unapologetically so, a fact we are constantly reminded of by the several corpses of those he killed for doing nothing more than stand in his way. That's right, the writers of this movie did a better job in telegraphing the villain's true nature than the writers of the new Batman movie. The secret of the Telegian is further proof that all those awful Godzilla films Jun Fukuda would later make were, above everything else, victims of the circumstances, and that the man was more than capable of producing movies of decent quality. Unfortunately, he was still second bananas to Ishiro Honda, so as soon as Goji's daddy became available, he was called back for another one of these mutant flicks. The result was mixed. The human vapor is definitely a step back to Telegian in most regards. Most of them, anyway. The villain, for instance, is not nearly as fun to watch as the one from the previous installment, being one of those examples of too serious for its own good type of character. With nothing better to do after being retired from the army, a man named Mizuno allows himself to be subjected to a scientific experiment that grants him the ability to turn into gas at will. With his newfound skill, he starts robbing banks and giving the stolen money to his crush, a performer named Fujitsu, so she can assemble a new spectacle worth of her talent. Once again, they try to give the villain some rational and sympathetic motivation, which is fine and all, tiresome in the current pop culture landscape, but fine. The problem is that the film wanted us to feel sorry for a guy who cold-heartedly kills anyone standing anywhere near his way. At least the Telegian had a much less noble pursuit inside, so his other atrocities could be justified as a byproduct of him being nuts. Stealing money for his girlfriend is a comparatively inoffensive pursuit and a stark contrast to the gratuitous murders Mizuno perpetrates throughout the story. If only the film had pushed for a bad-shit insane angle for the character, like they did in the prior flick, it would all be more understandable. But here, no, they take the whole issue too serious. As much as the tone for the later half of the film is a mess, completely undecided if Mizuno is a tragic figure or an unrepenting monster, I have to admit the climax of this one is decidedly the best out of all the 3 films. It is a very dramatic piece, with the tension slowly building up as the characters must confront their own ideals and decide if it is worth carrying on with the murder of Mizuno. Without spoiling it too much, all I'm going to say is that this is a very, very rare case of characters from this sort of film actually undergoing some sort of development throughout the adventure, which should be enough to make me hold this climax in high regard. It is also a very pretty sequence overall, focusing a lot on Fujitsu's performance, which probably holds some kind of symbolism to the movie's plot. It is just that I am too ignorant to figure out what this symbolism is. For the climax alone, I rank this movie as 2nd place overall. Not as good as The Secret of the Telegian, but definitely an improvement over the HMan. Not that the bar is that high or anything, but anyway. As a closing note, the human vapor came very close of getting a fully fledged sequel in the years after its release. In this film, the titular character would have to fight Frankenstein's monster, and I think I've said enough. I'll let your imagination fill the gaps. Probably the worst thing they ever did to these films was labeling them as a unified trilogy. Once you place them side by side, it becomes very hard to ignore their aggressively formulaic nature, something that I am usually willing to turn a blind eye to. This has the unwanted side effect of tainting whatever good this trilogy has to offer. It becomes harder to appreciate the films for their own merits when their own merits are nigh inexistent. I am over the limit with Toho films. It will be probably a while before I review another one of these. Just a heads up, see you next time.